All right, good afternoon. We're about to get started. I just ran into Tatiana's notes in front of me. I'm very tempted to read them, but soon. Today my introduction is very short. I'm actually doing an introduction to the introduction. This is the first joint event that we're doing with cityLAB, which is fantastic. We find a lot of points of sort of alignment and overlap in our interests and the kinds of voices and projects that we want to have in the department as part of our conversations, and seeing how those conversations progress to hopefully enter the work that all of you are doing in studios and other classes. So today I'm just here to say welcome to Tatiana, to welcome everybody to the hall, and to thank Dana Cuff for doing the honors of introducing Tatiana tonight. Thank you.
Sure. Mariana always gives such great introductions. It was a little intimidating over the weekend trying to make sure I did the same for Tatiana. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. It's really wonderful to see everyone. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome Tatiana Bilbao to UCLA. She, as Mariana said, is the first of what will be annual lecturers, co-sponsored by cityLAB and the Architecture and Urban Design Department. We inaugurate this co-sponsorship also with the cityLAB block party that's happening in the courtyard, to which you're all invited after the lecture, where there'll be an exhibition of some of cityLAB's current work, along with food and drink. And you'll see some of the cityLAB folks in their t-shirts if you want to know what any of the work's about. Please pick up some of that free, cool swag that's out there. That is all really the result of the creative and dedicated efforts of the cityLAB team. In this case, led by Yang Yang, who I see standing in the back. Yeah. And now, but the list goes on of all the people whose efforts went into this. Manos Prosaloglu, Kay Wright, Jane Wu, Gus Wendell, Jian Kim, Alexa Vaughn, Emma Fullerman, Kinami Rhodes, Melody Wong, I'm not kidding, it goes on, Carrie Gamble, Claire Nellisher, Ryan Conroy, Gustavo Leclerc, Udam Lee, and Woody Miodol. Thank you all. For this first lecture, we intentionally identified an architect, and I'm not sure there'd be anyone better actually in the world, who embodies the highest principles that we aspire to both in our department and at cityLAB. And so let me describe some of those principles. To start, Bilbao believes that everyday life and people are at the heart of design. To quote her, architecture is a platform for anyone to create their own way of living. You might think, as an example, the 120-kilometer pilgrimage trail in Mexico with monuments that you can walk up into, look out from, pass through, or the houses that are depicted in her work with kids and dogs and trucks, or in the exhibition about laundry, one of my favorites, which moves it from a sort of isolated private work of gendered domesticity back into the civic and social affair of the public wash house. A second principle is that direct relations to materials, whether that's poured concrete, see the Culiacan Botanical Garden, or the Sea of Cortez Research Center and Aquarium, which I hope we'll get to look a little at, rammed earth walls at Casa Ajijic, or glazed frame of a greenhouse qua living room at Los Terrenos House, immersed in the forest outside of Monterrey. These offer a kind of transcendent dignity to the inhabitants as well as to the environment. And it's particularly, I think, important for us to see that the notion of inhabitation and the preciousness of the environment are kept together in her work. Bilbao is also quite explicit about the idea of the architect as sole author, that can be productively retired, because all projects are better as collaborations. This is obvious not only in her outreach to involve other firms, but in the long list of credits associated with every project. Such collaboration reflects another principle about architecture's power to impact the lives of others, providing us architects the agency, if we choose to use it, of cultural relevance. Finally, such intentional collaboration leads to architecture when it's an assembly of related buildings that create worlds of possibility, both within that assembly and beyond into the site and the context. In this sense, the building itself is part of a collage of its site and city. I'll say a little bit more about collage later. Estudio Tatiana Bilbao, founded in 2004, is based in Mexico City. She's an international figure, as all of you know, who has won all the awards fit to be awarded. The Berlin Kunstpreis, the New York League of Architecture's Emerging Voices, the Golden Medal of Tau Sigma Delta, the German AW Architect of the Year Prize, among others. She teaches regularly at Yale, but has also taught at Harvard, the AA in Chile, in Germany, and her work has been published in every major news outlet and professional magazine. The work spans from furniture to museum installations, master plans to affordable housing, public spaces, monuments, and cultural institutions, the kind of practice that every architect aspires to. That work embodies an idiosyncratic mixture that I think is unique to Estudio Bilbao of generosity and intensity. Generosity towards the site, toward the occupants and the public, and an intensity of the materials, the dignity of form, and the labor involved to make the work. For Bilbao, the process is unending, and her way of working creates opportunities for the eventual buildings to remain open to changing everyday uses. Two central tenets of Tatiana Bilbao's practice are sure to stand out this evening and uniquely situate her as a model for architectural students and practitioners today. The first one is that images do work beyond representation, and this is where collage has been so fruitful in Estudio Tatiana Bilbao. Collage specifically has grown into a generative force in her firm and has evolved into an immersive, playful, and beautiful visual platform. Collage keeps the imaginative process open for the architects and their collaborators to resist fixing a project into a static rendering. Moreover, Bilbao has invented the collage as an architectural sketch, pulling images together into collage vignettes, then pulling together those vignettes into more comprehensive collages, and then sketching over that. So I think the whole process of making is so fundamental to the work we'll see. The second tenet is that domesticity is at the heart of architecture. Designing spaces for everyday life, in her words, is a form of activism. Well-funded private house projects inform her affordable housing and allow its architecture to begin with a sense of expansiveness rather than constraint. In Mexico, housing is a basic and constitutionally given right, a right that goes beyond mere shelter to a dignified and pleasing or inspiring home. We should be aspiring to the same. Given the intertwined histories of Mexico and Southern California, the push for housing as a human right here in Los Angeles, and the potential power of design representation, we look forward to her works expanding into our own context here in Los Angeles, which is happening, and we'll hear more about that the next time you come back. Please join me in welcoming Tatiana Bilbao.
Well, thank you, Mariana, and thank you, Dana. I hope I get I fulfill all the tabs you open of my work. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you all for being here. It's really for me an honor to be able to share my work with you tonight. For me, it's exactly what we do. Sharing and talking and building at the same time is part of the same job. Architecture is a colonizing act. By itself, with no other condition, it creates an imposition to the place it's built. So if we think about it in this way, it really is colonizing a space, a land, a ground in which it is erected. But architecture is a necessary act for us in order to live in this planet. We are one of the only organisms We're actually not one of the. We're the only living organism in this planet that needs a shelter to exist. And we have proven that it really is not only a shelter, because we've proven that caves are not enough. It's really a much more set of complex features that allows us to really be able to inhabit in this planet. So therefore, architecture is a necessary, absolutely necessary act. I didn't learn this in school. It took a profound act of learning from my own experience, and probably it did not fall into place, really, this idea of what architecture is and what shelter means, until I had the life-changing experience of becoming myself architecture. And this, I'm borrowing the words of Isabel Martínez Abascal, who describes it very well, that when I became pregnant for the two little human beings that inhabit in my belly and brought them to this planet, it was when I realized that architecture, it's really a very important place to hold bodies to exist in this planet. If you're able to put up the volume, it would be great of that video. I don't know if it's possible. I really started working on architecture and thinking how profoundly vital was for our bodies since ever. But as I said, I don't think I had been able to understood it profoundly until I did become architecture. And it was really that thought of understanding that architecture provides a primary form of care that moved me to become an architect. But also that really founded the first part of my work and the core of it, as Dana was saying, which for me is really thinking about the domestic space and the core unit that really is what provides the primary form of care to our bodies. I grew up in a country, which Dana already said it, that architecture is not only something necessary, it is also a constitutional right. Housing, it is described in the Constitution as the right that every citizen has to have a dignified and enjoyable place to live in. It really draws back from the fact that architecture is, first of all, foremost necessary to inhabit, and to inhabit it correctly and to grow up in it, it needs that. So since I started working, I really dedicated my whole work revolving through these ideas, profoundly thinking on how this act provides care for people. So it does colonize a place, and it's necessary for us to inhabit. How do we deal with these things, and how do we work with those tools? We really started working and understanding the legal tools we had around, but also the physical tools we had to be able to insert ourselves in the system of providing ideas for affordable houses and affordable places for people to thrive. And I think that there is a very important thing why we discarded caves, as humans, as humanity in the beginning, because we humans need places that inspire our lives. And I use this word, before I didn't even pronounce it, because for me it has been misused. in such that inspiration becomes a platform for the soul to thrive. For me, inspiration is much more profound, and it's for humans to thrive, both physically and spiritually. So architecture should become this platform for inspiring our lives. So that's why caves were not enough, and shelters do not fulfill the full thing. So we started really working and understanding what is that, no, and how can we do it in many, many ways. And we propose different types of possibilities. We work not only in the design realm, we work also in the political realm, trying to create impacts in systems and programs that the government also has in place. We created a strategy that, a design strategy that the base of a house could be built for $8,000 at that time and at that moment, and in Mexico City. So please mind all those things when thinking of these houses. Not accurate specifically, also not today. But at that time was that. And what we wanted really was a strategy for people to understand how to create their own house. We built 23 of those houses. People built 23 of those houses. One of the prerogatives of the system is that it should have been able to be built by the people and with the local conditions and the local materials. This program, I mean, it's a long story. I'm not going to be describing it specifically, but this program is a federal program that provides the possibility of a house to someone that has really no means at all, no? So in Mexico, the very big picture of who covers that right, no, is through a bank called the Infonavit that holds the savings of workers, but that they should be legal workers, but in an economy that holds 51% of its workers are non-legal, which I really don't understand these terms because I don't think who is legal and who's illegal. I don't think no one is illegal in this life, but anyway, this is how the government classifies it. And then the rest is shared by many different programs that the government also puts in place for those who don't kind of fill into the definition of the legal worker that can access to a house subsidized or financed at least by the Infonavit. So this system is called Vivienda Popular, and what they do is they hold in this agency 100 plus different types of models. So the people from different towns who qualify for this program go and choose from this manual of 100 plus different models of houses, prototypes, and build the house, no, in different ways. I mean, this is a very short story of what the program in reality is, but it explains what I'm trying to say. So the house, in this case, this strategy falls into this program, and what we thought was we needed to create and design a strategy and not a prototype, because if this is going to be built in any different type of region in Mexico and with different types of materials, it also holds very different types of social arrangements and cultural arrangements, which for us is kind of the center of everything. So we cannot create a prototype because there's not a prototypical human. So how can we create a design that holds any type of person in this case? We obviously, nothing is universal and nothing is infinite and possible. So we obviously understood its failures by implementing this on this kind of Acuña development, but also we prove its benefits. So one of the incredible things is that this house was able to be kind of saving space, but by multiplying the interior use of it, but also expanding the possibilities of growth or shrinking of the case, but also on the way of inhabiting by allowing not, for example, a kitchen not to be inside or a kitchen to be part of the communal kind of area of the internal house, but also part of the external communal house. I mean, it was a complex system that allowed multiple options, but of course not infinite. And we also worked in more kind of institutionalized, let's say, systems, as in France. We did 3 buildings in France. 2 of them were very restricted because they were part of the social housing system in France, which it is very, very systemized, institutionalized, and in a way, kind of a system that works for giving solutions of affordability to very, very low income people or no income people. And it is an extensive program. And we were kind of invited by Herzog and Nemeron, who did a master plan for a new area of development in the city of Lyon, in the city center, which used to be an industrial site. The city asked Herzog and Nemeron to then think on the first block, how the first block would look like, and then kind of open the idea of bringing in different types of architects into building those buildings in the block. And they invited us. Then the developer decided we were going to do 3 buildings. This is something that it was not a decision that anybody understood why, but we did. And we work in 2 of those buildings where a social housing immersed in the program, and one was a free market. Our strategy, first of all, they asked us for 3 different buildings. For us, it was hard to think of that we realized afterwards, but that's another story. Long story short, we ended up doing 3 different buildings. One of them is the one you see here on the right with wood, kind of wooden ends. And then the other one is the one you see on the far left, which is a white one, and then the other one is the gray on the back. So those 3 buildings, as I said, the 2 social ones are the one to the right and the left, and the one market rate one is the gray one. And what we did is we created a strategy of thinking, okay, when you, in France, the idea is to really think on how every human can inhabit equally. Contrary to it, and ironically to it, they don't treat every human the same. And this is a side note, but every single meeting I went there, I end up crying. It was very hard for me being a woman and from Mexico. I speak French, but still every time I was diminished on my opinion, on my thoughts, and it was very, very hard to work in this realm. But I'm very, very privileged person, so if I was discriminated there, I cannot imagine how people is discriminated in this country or in others for issues of race or of gender. But anyway, that's another topic and that's a whole nother story. Finally, we end up building these 3 buildings. And what we wanted to do is to create an understanding of the architecture as the reflection of also the type of society or community or block, at least, that we wanted to create. So those 2 buildings that are the affordable house buildings, every apartment is different, and every relationship to the exterior and to the interior is completely different. And our thoughts was, when you really are at the bottom of the pyramid in this society today, you don't have a way of identification, of representation. No? You work cleaning bathrooms in a supermarket, or you work in the cashier of a store, or you work, you don't have a position in the workplace, you don't have a position in society, because you're really at the bottom of it. You are probably a recent immigrant or a son of immigrants. That is very hard for you to climb up in this society. So we thought that the place where finally you are able to get here and a secure mode of shelter should be your place of identification. So it should be unique and one, obviously part of one block, but unique and one. And to the other end of the pyramid, you are the other way around. No, you have a lot of places that give you the possibility of your identity, which is your social network, your place of work, your recognition there, and many other things. No, so and you actually are kind of always trying to fall apart from that community to become unique and to become your own self. So in this case, we did every apartment the same. The whole entire building looks the same as stating a statement, you belong to this community. I mean, I don't know if, at the end if it works, but the block works. The people really understand that, for example, these kind of exterior spaces are connecting a lot of what happens in this community, and it's creating a horizontal possibility of relationships that is not only our internal architectural work for each building, but it's also what the design of the block and the design of each of the buildings is kind of giving to it. Not that we didn't learn from all the troubles that we had on that project to get it built. Not only we decided not to build in France, but we then endeavor to do another competition and win. And in this case was to build 3 different buildings that are really proposing a new type of inhabiting. No, it's a building that it's part of a program put in place for the new Paris 2030 by the Major Anne Hidalgo. And what they wanted is really understanding how buildings are not only built more sustainably, so more responsibly in terms of materials, but also how buildings pass through time. And this is a question that for me is really important, and I'm going to talk about it later. But for us was then a really opportunity to think, no? And in this case, it's really deep immersed in what the building is. So the building is a flexible building. It's not a housing building, it's not an office building, it's not a commercial dedicated building, is all of them above. So the structure allows a lot of things to happen in between, no? And this idea of really trying to understand how architecture passes through time is something that we have been trying to think of it, and who holds and who doesn't hold it, and what holds and what doesn't hold, is something that we have been experimenting in many realms, no? And we have had the opportunity to work in many private houses, which obviously fall into the category of the very privileged society. But that still, even with that, we are really enforcing these structures to become super efficient, to create many possibilities for its inhabitation, no? And not only its inhabitation, but its future and the future of those spaces. I'm not gonna describe them in full, but one of the kind of prerogatives, for example, that we are able to explore in these places, which are unique, is, for example, here and the notion of kitchen, which I'm going to go a little bit more specifically before, but we've been very clearly understanding how kind of the house determines the way we live, and that's the next topic of development in the lecture, but how really even determining the way society is divided, and how and who works where, and who is discriminated, exploited, or privileged then. So in this case, the kitchen is mobile. So this is a structure that is open, that can be open towards a very big terrace, and the kitchen can be placed anywhere and can be moved, no? As in contrast to other houses that we did previously, where we started believing that probably the model of the open kitchen, this was 14 years ago, would have been a model for eliminating hierarchies in the house, then we obviously, of course, afterwards realized it was not. But also, I mean, kind of the following really consistent part of the work has been understanding that what we have done, kind of reviewed in different terms of time, but also with different eyes, which we often do, no, creates a possibility of understanding what's the next step, no? So we've been also a tool of perpetrating these systems of normalization, of inhabiting a certain way in life, a system that normalizes also and standardizes the way of social relationships exist. And we have done houses with master bedrooms, for the heteropatriarchal couple, and we have learned also from them, no? And much more recently, we have understood, what is that, how in society we have been kind of fantasizing for a way of living. And not only that, we have been translating that fantasized idea of inhabiting to all our built environment and what are the consequences of that. Architecture is an act of imposition, and an act of imposition that defines the way we inhabit, and not only the way we inhabit, the way defines and imposes who can and how can someone inhabit this planet, no? So today we have a standardized idea on how we live, and this is the house, the single family house, which should be inhabited by a couple, hetero couple, with 2 kids, hopefully, because if the third comes, then the problem starts. But also, that is not only shrinking and reducing the definition of social relationships and of consideration of possibilities of family and close bonds into a single thing, it also kind of fails to think that there's time passing, no? So if you are fortunate enough to fall into this definition for a certain period of your life, then you have the whole built environment built for yourself. That means that you can really choose disregarding your social configuration, obviously regarding your social status, your economical possibilities, etc., where to live. But if you don't fall in this definition, which is the 80% of the world, then you have more problems, no? But also, kind of these only 20%, I believe is even less, I don't know what the numbers, but it's the minority of the population that falls into this definition that lives this way. It only happens for, what, 1/4, if so, of your life. I mean, not even. When you get married and you have kids, then they grow, and then and then what? But then they grow, but already when they're 15, this model is exhausted. So how are we architects becoming the tools of the perpetuations of these discriminations and these impositions? For me, is a subject of study since a long time. In 2017, there was a very big earthquake in Mexico City, that not in Mexico City only, it was very extended. There were 2 earthquakes that really impacted 1/3 of the country's area and torn down somehow around between 500,000 and 1 million homes. I mean, imagine how inaccurate is that number. But it did impacted a lot, and the majority of the impact was in the rural areas of Mexico. And what happened is that all those structures were poorly built. And I'm not going to go there because it's a subject of a whole nother lecture, but it really happened because there has not been a real kind of understanding and learning of the use of the industrial materials that were put into all these areas after the signage of the NAFTA agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada. And what happened when this was signed is that a lot of industrialized new materials were poured into places where they didn't know how to use them. So basically cinder block, steel, and concrete were really kind of widespreadly put out affordably to these people, and these people started to build with those materials that also represented kind of progress and modernity, etc., etc. As I said, it's a subject of a whole nother talk. But in sum, that the lack of knowledge that needed to come behind with those materials to build them was what caused this huge loss of houses in this earthquake. So what we decided as a group of architects, 400 architects, we got together and we decided to understand how to help rebuild those houses with the possibilities and the tools that we had. We were one of the few at the end carrying on, because, you know, when these things happen, there's 400 architects, but then at the end there's 3 working. And what we did is we it was not 3, it was more like 25, but yeah, for the 400 that at the beginning started. But then what we decided is work in San Simón el Alto. It was a little town where there were 1,000 more or less homes down. And what we really thought it was that these people knew how to inhabit that place, and these people knew they do inhabit. So what we had were the skills on how to use the materials. So we only served as that, as kind of part of the process of rebuilding these houses. We had no decision in terms of design at all. We were only giving technical advice to people, and these were people who rebuilt them homes their own way. And here we learned a whole deal. No, first of all, kitchens are communal. They cannot understand how we can have kitchens inside spaces, small spaces, because there's no way to cook. There's no way to cook for many people. There's no way to cook also the flavors and the things that we cook and that they cook. We learned that not only cooking is a collective act, eating is a collective act. We learned that there's not a single way of cooking. Actually, there's many, many ways of cooking, but also there's the necessity of having many types of elements and pieces of furniture to cook too. So architecture is an imposing act. If we think that today the whole built realm comes in also with an integrated kitchen that only allows one type of appliance to cook, then we are imposing the way even we cook and the way we even eat, therefore. So, and it's not only the kitchen, it's the way we sleep, no? We did this very kind of, for us, open strategy for a house, a laboratory of housing in Apan, that we needed to propose an idea of a house that could be built in Mexico in a certain type of climate, etc. So what we propose is taking our first design idea to a next level, and what we wanted to understand and to think was that we could create different modules that could be used for different things. But in reality, I mean, also the flexibility is constrained, no? Because, for example, in these modules, you cannot hang a hammock, and not everybody sleeps in a bed. We tend to think that that's the best way of sleeping. For me, it is. I grew up like that, and I grew up in a place where culturally, socially, physically is better. But not everybody, no? In the Mayan area of the Yucatan Peninsula, the weather is extremely hot, extremely humid, and there's a lot of very malicious bugs. So hammocks are the best response to it, and is the most kind of affordable, let's say, solution in many realms, because when you are able to swing during the night, you're also freshening yourself, being able to sleep better than in a bed. In a bed, you then need a mechanical type of ventilation in order to allow you to sleep in this type of weather. But not only that, the bed holds the bugs, and then you cannot, you are exposed to it, and then you need a more robust health system. So, and then you need a more important also kind of infrastructural system for holding all these people that need air conditioning or mechanical ventilation. So it's not allowing everybody to inhabit, no? It's also imposing a necessity of a type of furniture that is not necessarily the best solution for everybody, although we think it is. Probably is only the best solution for the industry and for the capital, but not for the people. So how can we address all those issues? For us has been always a question, no? In this case, what we wanted to create is different modules that could be arranged in different types of ways in order to create different possibilities for people with different social relationships, no, to create a space to inhabit. As I said, this was only built for a laboratory and for a specific type of studying a type, but it has not been replicated. We have done several of these proposals and ideas, and we have revolved always to to the point where understanding that we need to create platforms for anyone to create their own way of living. And what is their own way of living? We are not anyone to decide and to understand specifically. We don't understand how those are different or not different. But anyway, we have been trying to understand what are those platforms, how is that possibility of us architects producing kind of only the base for anyone to create their own life. That's a question, and that has kind of fueled a lot of what we do. Architecture is a political act, and that defines the relationship between our bodies and the other, which and what body relates to which and what other way. I come also on a country that is very visible every time and every single moment, no? Architecture has been the tool for colonization. Architecture has been the way, the way for imposition, and architecture has been also the only way for inhabiting in a place, no? This is a photo of Tlatelolco, which is a central part in Mexico City, where it's called La Plaza de las Tres Culturas, the square of the three cultures. And it is called like that because it was a very important ancient pre-colonial site for the population that lived there. And then it was imposed through colonization with a Catholic church and a colonial plaza, part of the Spanish city that was imposed in the 1500. And then it was in the modern city imposed another way of inhabiting this place, which is a very big housing development by Mario Pani done in the 50s. So this is really a place where you can see, no, physically, this imposition that has been created both to the ground and to the people in this place. We have been working in several projects understanding how to create, how the architecture creates those platforms and those relationships between the body and the other. In St. Louis, Missouri, we have been working in this project for several years, which is a block, kind of an archetypical block, I would say, in many US cities, especially in the Midwest, that are kind of these residential rectangular blocks that used to hold for a period of time, with one could say small period of time, these single houses just kind of facing frontally the street. And we got a commission to do a project in one of these blocks of 22 homes. The idea was to do single homes, but to think how can already the house pose a different relationship towards the ground, towards the others, and then therefore create platforms for those relationships, human relationships, to be different. I don't know if better or not. I hope my thing is that they could be better. But what we did is create those individual houses with circles of elements, architectural elements that provide from the most intensely private, intimate space towards the most collective, extensive one, different scales of areas and rooms that for us create platforms for different types of relationships. So then we kind of curated and understood this block in a very different way. So it's not housing facing the streets, it's housing relating internally to others in many different ways. And then we invited 3 other different firms to create a different type of house. And those houses are repeated throughout the 22. It's not an even number, so some of the houses are repeated 5, some of the houses are repeated 4 times. And within the block, we created spaces, some that are collectively used internally for those residents of the block, such as the pool. We created some spaces that are open and also usable by the whole neighborhood or city because they're public, like the park. Or we created spaces that are smaller in scale, that are for definitely less kind of people within the community. Other spaces that are clearly kind of meant to be used more individually but exteriorly, so also kind of with this relationship. and a productive garden that then creates a different relationship also with the ground and the community. And kind of that ethos was carried out also from the interior of the houses. Our design, it's a very simple strategy of two rectangles, that one is rotated to create a more private space on the top that is also has an exterior space, and that on the bottom really extends and expands toward the more kind of collective public spaces. So what we kind of create in the ground floor is this extensive open area, that in the bottom it's a much more secluded space. These houses are being built. Actually, a lot of them have been inhabited, I think 12 more or less. And we have been able to understand this possibility of the relationship between the individual and the collective in scales and different realms in different ways. The other architects that are working this is a house by Macías Peredo, which is an office from Guadalajara in Mexico. This is a house in the forefront by Productora, which is a firm based in Mexico City and in New York. And in the back is a house by Moss, which is an architectural firm based in New York. So in a way, trying to understand that yes, we all humans need our individual space, but we are part of a system, an intricately linked system of dependency, of interdependency between each other. So how the room can become the city and how the city can fit in the room, for us is an important subject that we have been really trying to pursue in many of our projects. This is a project we did we're doing, actually it's being built as we speak, in Monterrey, and how to translate those stories. Again, it's very easy to do it in a very single house, privately owned. It's also kind of more easy, let's say, to do it in a more controlled space like St. Louis. And then how do you bring that into a building of 150 units, which is the case here in Roble? So what we did is to understand that the way a community needs to interact or can interact in better ways, not necessarily needs, is through platforms that architecture can provide. So spaces that are smaller, but really kind of placed in many parts of the building that could be used, for example, for rooms, for extra rooms for a unit. So my parents come to visit, so they inhabit this room that is extra in the building, or this room is used sometimes for, let's say, child care. So 4 moms get together, because normally it's the moms, unfortunately, that hold into that. 4 moms get together and decide to take care of these 4 kids in one single room, so that room could be used for that, but also more open spaces like terraces, or like, for example, a pool, etc., that are placed in different parts of the building. So in an idea of trying to understand how to provoke community by creating platforms that are necessarily to be addressed and to be managed and to be conflicted spaces for community creation is something that it was a question on this building. As I said, this one is being built at the moment with also a lot of ideas in the interior that kind of respond to this prerogative, and we will see what is that as a result. But we hope that kind of this provokes the possibility of a different type of community. What we're trying next is understanding and carrying it up to also kind of this topic again of time within architecture. It's something that it's a complete friction that exists within architecture. Architecture is a determinant act as well. And it is very specific to its place, its moment, and it is there, and it's static. It's a very static thing. But nevertheless, it holds one of the most organic processes ever, which is life, And it's an ever-changing process. So how can we work on these two things, with these two things and these two elements together? And we are trying to create a possibility of a building that is not only flexible in terms of its use, it's not determined, it doesn't hold a small bathroom that cannot exist in any other way than a bathroom with a water closet and a sink and a shower as we know it today, but also in its size. It cannot be many other things. How can we eliminate those notions of labeling spaces? In this case, that was the prerogative and the question. We're using a building that, or a structure that existed. We're trying to understand how the house could be flexible. We're trying to think what are those communal common spaces that are shared, and internally in those structures, how are those apartments and units that can be transformed for more open versions or more closed versions, depending on the moment of the life of the person that inhabits is there, but also of the moment of the society that is at present when it's used. So this is a project ongoing in Mexico City that tries to understand that. One of the most kind of learning lessons for the domestic realm has been a project that we've been working for 8 years in Germany, and it's monastery. Padre Kilian, which is a Cistercian monk from the Abbey of Heiligenkreuz, called me 8 years ago, asking me for help to build their new monastery in Germany. It has not only been a lifetime project, it has been a life-changing project. And one of the things is that I believe that I have encountered one of the only typologies that really is dedicated to hold the body to exist. Of course, the next part of my lecture is not going to be dedicated to convince you that you should become a Cistercian monk, nor that we should all live as Cistercian monks, but really truly about the understandings and the lessons that we have held into this project. And as I said, is the only typology that really holds a body, a physical body to exist, because it is a structure that does that it was built for that. These people live this spiritual life, and they want to live this spiritual life, and therefore they need a building that holds their physical body. For them, they live a spiritual life. The monasteries were also communities of monks that want to live this life, that understood that the only way of being able to live this in truly and fully individual life is through the holds of a community. So this is why they were created. It's also, again, a subject of another lecture, because it's been 8 years of research into this topic. But the understanding that every monastery is built on the same basis that works perfectly in tune with the hours of the day and the days of the year, meaning the light and the weather and the temperature of the day and the and the year. It's really something that it's very kind of key to the clue of kind of the full understanding of what is a building that holds a body to exist. And this building is absolutely determinant who can inhabit there and who doesn't, so therefore it's hyper exclusive. and hyper-discriminatory, if one would say. But on the other hand, it really is the only building that I know that is dedicated to understand what is the physical necessities of a body in order to live this life. And that understands those necessities not only from an habitual point, so not the physiological necessities, is also the spiritual necessities of that body. It's also not only the spiritual necessities that they create the rituals in which we inhabit. We all do hold rituals to inhabit, but it's also the rituals in relationship to the surrounding and the ever-changing environment that we have around us. And we have been working, understanding what is the correct place to be. We had to be involved in the selection of the site, which is also something that was very interesting in the process. And we have created a design. I forgot, very importantly, to mention that this is a collaborative project. So when I started working with Patrick Killian, I understood that there was a necessity of much more minds to be involved. So it's not only a collaborative project in the way we normally did before, in terms of adding a lot of people into the table of design, but also we invited two other firms to work very close side by side. One is Dogma, led by Victoria Aurelia and Martino Tatara from Belgium, and the other one is Maggio, who is led by Ana Puiggener and Guillermo, and Maria and Arturo, and Alfredo, sorry, that are involved in this design of this project. So more than the importance of the architecture, for me, it's really that the architecture we have created and where we are in the project, for me, really bringing it into this lecture is the understanding of how a building is really created for a ritual that very specifically performs the acts of the everyday into a more profound act. But that is also designed in this very well understanding that we are individuals that need to be nurtured by our individual internal life, but that completely depend on the other to exist. So it understands the necessity of this scalation of relationships that I talked in St. Louis, Missouri, in a very explicit way, no? From the understanding of their life, but also from the definition of the space. So for them, what holds the possibility of living these individual lives is the body. And the body then, therefore, is essential to the existence. And then the body is covered from with the first layer, which is the robe, and this is why the robe is so important. And then the robe and the body is held in their individual cell, but this cell is connected to the cloister, where is the first point of encounter of the whole community. And then the cloister is connected to other more collective spaces, and then connected to the church, which is finally the place of communion and collective encounter. But the ritual of the service that they perform every day doesn't allow them to go from the individual body intimate space towards the communal space in one. You need to create the procession on all those spaces with a relationship that those create in order to arrive and also in order to retrieve. So in a way, creating the possibility of the escalation of relationships that I was talking in St. Louis, Missouri. Architecture is a determining act that defines our relationship with the ground. So as I said in the beginning, is a colonizing act. It colonizes the ground we live and therefore determines how is that relationship. And I grew up in a city that is very visible as well. We are on top of a lake. And the Spanish colonized the lake in order the civilization that existed there really worked with the lake and used the lake for their benefit, but also for their thinking of it as a system of relationships that really one feeds the other one. But the Spanish arrived there and decided that this was not a correct and good relationship, and then therefore they imposed a city that buried the lake, and that's how we live today. But we live on top of this lake. It's a muddy ground, it's shaky, and we live with it every day. So for me, the relationship to the ground is somehow unstable. It creates instability, but also it creates impossibility, But as a way, as of course, what I understand from where I live, it creates an imposition to it. As Dana was describing, we create this pilgrimage route with different points of encounter through the route that kind of are creating the possibility of the relationship towards the landscape in a broader way, and therefore starting from the ground, that lifts you up to this kind of Catholic ritual that happens there every single year. Here in this case, we also invited very different architects from different parts of the world, and this is a structure designed by Alejandro Aravena, and that are kind of point of encounters through the route that are also kind of linking you to others, to the landscape, and to the possibility of the ritual in intervals in an interesting way, and that was kind of our take on it. But kind of that idea, we really have taken it and carry out through all the projects that we've been doing. And one of the projects that we have kind of first and foremost understood, the course of nature, was our interventions in the botanical garden in Culiacan. Culiacan is a city on the west coast of Mexico. It is not a coastal city. It's 80 kilometers in the coast, and but it's a city where kind of you might know it because obviously this is the city of El Chapo, El Cartel de Sinaloa it's based, and that's exactly the moment where we were hired. It was kind of the uprising of this cartel, drug cartel, and the people of the city were very proud of their city, and they didn't want the city only to be known of that, but also expand their notions and understandings of public space. But we understood that we were creating an intervention in a garden, in a botanical garden, that foremost the ground, the nature that grow there, and the different species that kind of interact here was what was giving the grounds for this project to exist. So we created an architecture that, in our sense, created an imposition, but set a kind of a type of relationship with the nature around that for us was kind of the relationship, that dialogue with it. So what we did is kind of fragmented all the structures in many structures scattered through the whole garden, and that those structures were small enough to provide the possibility of a functioning service for the garden. For example, in this case, is a room for kids, an educational facility for kids, or a small library, or an auditorium, but that they only hold that kind of program there, no? So, and if you are in any of these rooms and want to go to the bathroom, then you have to go out and go to the bathroom, because the bathroom is another structure in another building. And in this case, yes, if it's raining, you get wet to go from your activity to the bathroom. If a bird is singing, then you hear him. And if the wind is blowing, you will feel it. If it's 40 degrees outside, which is the majority of the days here, then you will be exposed to that heat. But yes, it's a botanical garden, and you go here to have an experience with this nature, that it's there, curated nature, whatever, imposed nature, created by men or whatever, but it's there. To it. So you're not there in a shopping mall, you're not there in an experience that needs to be completely protected and surrounded, you're there in an experience that needs to be able to exist, but also kind of perform as nature does its way. No? We have been doing a lot of different interventions in this garden, and it's the most, kind of the longest project we've been working on. We started working in 2005, and we continue to work today, which is also a privilege, and again, a subject of another lecture. Architecture, it is a formal act. No, it needs to have a formal definition, and you cannot get away with it, but its representation defines its intentions. So since very early, I really didn't had the correct tools on my hands to represent what we were doing. So we had to challenge those as well, no? Because for me, the tools that I had, the renders, the plans, the sections, the elevations, the technical plans, the construction details, we're kind of making a service on itself to some specific thing, but we're not making a service for me for kind of designing and proposing ideas for platforms to people to inhabit. So how could we create not only the architecture that really does not kind of imposes a single way, but also how we represent it. In this project, we were asked to do kind of retreat home in Spain in a project called Solo Houses. 2 houses have been built by Office from Belgium and by Petson von Elrichhausen. And we were asked to also design a house here. And what we did is we created a set of structures that are imposed in this landscape in different ways. They multiply and they divide, and then they're formally very expressive. They have a specific form because we cannot detach from that form. And then, therefore, for us, with no programmatic intention, they were designed just only formally. But how could we then really create them as a built form? Then we had to mess up with the kind of formal representation that we learned in school and that we have in the hands, because we had to submit plans to the municipality. So here we started thinking, okay, if we draw plans with pieces of furniture, and then we're determining how each of these modules have to be used, but we don't want that. But we need them for permits. So we started thinking of challenging those drawings and creating representations that are not only plans, but are sections, but are also facades, but are also models. Those are little pieces of paper that can be folded. I mean, many ways of trying to challenge those notions and those were fine, accepted, but until we arrived to the point where we need images. And we were like, okay, now here again with a problem, no? So what we decided is to think that we would give these to a person that worked in our office, Gonzalo, and we asked him, how would you live in this house? So this is Gonzalo's house, it's not our house. We only did the modules, no? And we, as Dana was saying, we took the point of creating collage as a form of representation, but also as a tool for design, because we thought, okay, if we want houses to be used or places to be used differently, if we use the same tools for designing and we start the same way we were learned to start design, then we will not arrive to anything different. So here in this case, the brief asked for, again, a house that would be built in the outskirts of or in the rural realm of Germany, and they invited also 20 architects to each of them design a house for the new ways of life. And the new ways of life were described in the brief as those working and living in the same place. But for me, that was nothing new, because we have been living and working in the same place since the start of humanity. For me, the far most important place of work is the house, because it's where reproductive work is done, and that's the work we need to exist. That's the far most important work. Nevertheless, it's not recognized in society, neither paid. But anyway, it's the most important work we do, so it's been done in the domestic realm since ever. But secondly, also the productive work, the work we do to earn money, it's done in the same place as we live and sleep since the start of humanity. So it's not new ways of life, it's ways of life. And for us was more of understanding how can we create a structure for different ways of life. So we created this chart in thinking that we were going to define spaces not by programs, but by activities or emotions. And then we defined kind of 6 different types of spaces. Why 6? Because the brief called for 6 spaces, a room, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, a living space, and a working space. And we created 6 spaces, different types of spaces, more individual, more collective. And then with the words, we started kind of collaging those spaces and defining those with collages. And then we had 6 collages, and then we said, now what? How do we design a house with these 6 collages? The time of the deadline was approaching, so we had not much how to develop our new system of designing. But we overlapped all those collages together, and we traced them on top, and then we said, okay, now how do we do a house from here? And then we started shaping a house, and we arrived to this point where, of course, we had to deliver the project and present it, and we had this model. And I was a little bit disappointed because I thought, well, we could have arrived to this same definition of this same house with the same type of system working and designing. And I was disappointed, but a year after, I got a call from someone and saying, we want to build this house. Actually, it's under construction, which is really interesting. And they said, well, this house is designed for our way of life. And I was like, oh yeah, what is that? Because we didn't label the rooms. We don't know what it is used for. We don't know exactly how it's going to be built. And they said, well, yeah, because it works like this, and we would put the room here and blah, blah. And they described the way of inhabiting this house completely different as I imagined. So I thought, well, something we did. We have taken that kind of notion, and I'm going to go faster. I'm going to end up very soon. I'm very sorry. I'm way above my time, but I'm aware. And we just recently did this project in Columbus, which it was in Exhibit Columbus. This was a set of curators that chose us to make an interventions in the Miller Plaza, which is the Miller Library Plaza, designed by I.M. Pei. And the whole kind of event was kind of driven by the idea of public by design. And we thought, what is public by design? And we thought, why don't we do something that is designed by the public? So we did all the tools of participatory design that we've learned in the schools that we all know that they fail because, of course, they create fantasies of people thinking on this space in many ways. And, of course, someone imagines it to be a dragon parking lot, but someone else imagines it to be a skating room, and someone else imagines it as being a living room. So how then you create a public space that is designed by everybody? With all those kind of ideas, no? So we created kind of all these talks by people. We gathered all these ideas and all these drawings made by children, but by elderly, but by many different types of population. And then we thought, well, obviously we're not gonna agree, we're not gonna put everybody in agreement to what should be here. But what we can do is why not that everybody uses the space in their own way. So we created a little bit of a library that they have inside, a library outside, of objects that we recalled from all the drawings that we got. And we designed the pieces of furniture, and then we put them in with different objects. So those objects were as chairs or tables or a seesaw or an umbrella or a yoga mat, or balls for playing or whatnot. And through the course of the exhibition, people started using them, people started obviously taking them, people started bringing other things, people started even dressing in the whole same colors as the library, which that was very strange. But I mean, kind of the whole idea was to think what is really a place that is designed by everybody. Well, we thought a place that could be designed every day in many different ways, even by you yourself differently every single day. I'm gonna skip this project because, as I said, I'm going to go directly to the end. And sorry. I definitely think that architecture, it is a communal act that defines our relationship, and not only with others, but very importantly with our own ecosystem. So how is that we are going to be related to our surrounding depends also on the strategies, design strategies that we are creating. And architecture, it is a procedural act with a very static ontological definition, and this is what I was referring at the beginning, no? That holds an ever-changing process, which is life. And we hadn't always thought of it, and we have then addressed it in many different ways, but I think that in a specific, very recent project, we kind of expressed in full ethos that what it means for us. We were asked, and this is the last project, sorry, very quick. we were asked to design in 2015 or to understand a little bit how to use this central park that existed in the city Mazatlan, which is of the same state, Sinaloa, as the Botanical Garden is, and of course there is a relationship between two projects. The city had been trying to protect this central area because it has a natural regulating lagoon in the center of it, so it declared a park. Obviously, it was after the city couldn't push anymore towards its interior because it gets flooded. But the city had not been able to kind of promote a strategy of really using this place because they were not kind of able to pull together a whole plan for it. But finally, some business people arrived to say, okay, city, we want to help you to consolidate this as a park and really create a platform for two very big institutions, a museum and an aquarium, to exist in this place. We were not going to design nor the museum nor the aquarium, and we developed the park. And what we decided is to understand how to use this place with these three conditions: a space that it's always flooded, a space that it's flooded some part of the year and some part of the year is not flooded, and a space that is never flooded. And this is a very special condition for Mazatlan, no? It's a process that changes through the season, which in LA, it happens less. In other cities happens much more presently, no? With the expression of the four seasons in nature, in the realm, in many ways, in the temperature, very drastically, but in Mazatlan it doesn't. No, people think that there's only one season, which they call hell because it's very hot, but there are four seasons, no, and it really is a cycle of changing. So this park really exposes that and exploits it to its possibility of use. So in this case, this is a plateau which sometimes is flooded and sometimes is able to be used in these ways. And when we started acting in the physical realm, we had to first kind of clean the whole lagoon, because every building here on the coast would throw its sewage to there. So when we're dealing the natural reconstitution of the lagoon, we were asked if we were able to design the aquarium. And they had a design. They had a design that existed with another architectural firm that had almost kind of gone into design development. It was not further than that. But when I was asked that, I thought for me it was a real problem, because first of all, I didn't believe in aquariums. I really thought of aquariums being exactly the representation of what this mural means. This mural is Man Controller of the Universe by Diego Rivera. Thought in 1933, it was painted in the Rockefeller Center, but the Rockefellers didn't like it for its political implications, so they erased it, but then Diego Rivera repainted it in Bellas Artes in Mexico, so right now it's you can see it in Mexico City. And it is kind of that, no? A man, and yes, a man with a gender, holding the center of the universe and controlling it in every regard, no? So I truly believe that that is kind of one of the most important fictions in which we live in, because first of all, we don't control a thing. Nature is what it controls everything. And second of all, we are nature. So this discourse of man destroying the universe or building it or rebuilding it or curing it, for me, is kind of one of the fictions in which we live in. The planet is kind of expelling us because we have been very bad inhabitants, but the planet is not going anywhere. We're not destroying anything. The only thing is we are signing our expiration date in this planet. So I was not kind of fond on the proposal. I told them I don't believe in aquariums because aquariums are the places you cannot enter this world, so then bring it to us. And they were like, yeah, okay, but we also really want to create an institution that relate ourselves to this underlying world. And then I said, okay, we're talking about business now, and what do you want? And they said, well, we want an aquarium that looks like an aquarium, no? And I said, well, that's impossible because the aquarium is out there, and it's one of the most important natural aquariums of the world, which is the Sea of Cortez. You have it 100 meters from there. What do you want to bring in, no? And they say exactly the possibility of a relationship to this world and the understanding that we are part of this world. And so then we had started to think, what is a building that really allows ourselves to understand that we are part of this ecosystem and that we depend on being part of this ecosystem in order to survive in this world. So we couldn't imagine what's a building on those sorts and that realm. And so we imagine ourselves in the year 2278 arriving to a building that was built in the year 2023. We don't know the purpose on which the building was built for, so we don't know what it was used for. We don't know how it kind of started to exist, but what we knew is that it was flooded in the year 2100, and that when the water receded, the building kind of emerged from the water, but it was then full of life. Life took over this building, and we were only arriving there to open paths to understand what was the life that really inhabit this building. So we created these two very big stairs to go on the top to understand kind of the flora and obviously the fauna that really installed itself on top of this building. And then we created this central kind of round patio in order to immerse yourself into this exploration of the building that really was taken by life. This building was built in 2023, and life is starting to emerge. And I'm waiting to be 2289 in order to understand how life takes over this building and what is that type of life that lives in this building. And as the title of my lecture, I hope at the end I arrived to kind of make you understand that for me, architecture is a collective act, that it is done collectively, but that really colonizes a place, imposing one being on top of the others, determines who and how can inhabit, mediates between us and our own ecosystem, relies on the other as common, and is done collectively. What is then the architecture that uses all those tools to become a platform that anyone can inhabit in this planet? Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm fine standing. Thank you, and sorry for extending so much. Yes, of course.
We'll take a very limited number of questions because of the large attendance. But we have a reception after, so please stay. Any questions?
Thank you for the wonderful talk. Looking at your buildings and seeing how much collage is shown from your buildings, I was just wondering if collage is part of your process from the beginning when you're designing, or if it's something you bring in to explain it to other people. And if it is part of your process, do you find that that instills a lot of the ideas that you're trying to bring in, like it's essential to your philosophy?
Yeah, thank you. So I believe we are collage to start with. And I believe that, and I hope that the architecture does what collage does. And what for me does is that it really allows for infinite types of interpretation, as infinite and as many as the existence of human beings, but also of the moment of that human in reading it. And not only that, it is never a finite and a final definition. A collage is always in mind and hopefully in physically something that is open to more additions or to some extractions, no, or many extractions. So in a way, I believe and I hope that the architecture that we do perform the same physically. And in the beginning, as I described, we were only using it as a means of representation. In a way, I think that we always use it as a tool of design subconsciously. But then we started with the House of Ways of Life, using it as a form, as a tool of producing and the process of architecture. And probably is the project in which we specifically have done it more kind of directly, no, with the imposition, with doing these collages and then the imposition of them and then the tracing of the house. But we are doing it in every project in many different ways, no? As I said, a collage is a way, no? It's a system, and then its form can be infinite. So there are many ways in which we think of collage in the process. But yes, to answer your question is yes, we use collage as a tool of design as well, not only as a form of representation of our architecture, but more profoundly as a way of thinking. That's the definition of our architecture. Maybe it was too clear or completely understandable.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'm wondering, so your philosophy seems very clear, as the previous person asked about philosophy, but how do you approach speaking about this to clients? Are people expecting this when they reach out to you, or how do you frame it? Does it depend on the situation?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things is that, first of all, we don't think as people as clients, although I fail always to use the same word. But we tend to think that we are doing the architecture collectively, and we are very clear about how we proceed. I mean, and one anecdote that serves as a good example. Many years ago, like 15 years ago, we were approached by a woman that wanted to build a house. And we present her with a proposal, with an idea, how we're going to work. We normally don't present an economical proposal. We present a form of work proposal because we think that we are going to agree on economical terms. Not always, and it's not always good, but well, we do. But that's not important, no? The most important thing is that we can be able to create a dialogue. And she said, well, I love everything about the proposal. I agree with the work. You said that, well, it's going to take you 8 months. And we said, yeah, more or less. We think that's the amount of time that it's going to take us. And she said, well, okay, see you in 8 months. I'm like, no, you need to be here every Friday. At what time it works for you? And she's like, no, but why? What for? So because you're designing your house. And she says, no, but you are the designer. I'm like, no, you are the designer. You're gonna live there. I'm not gonna live there. And then she said, well, but I don't know nothing about it. I said, you know everything about your life, and that's what we need to do. I mean, and she came the first day very skeptical, saying that she didn't understand why she was there. But the next, already the next meeting, she arrived earlier, and she said, well, this is becoming super fun. And then she said, well, this is absolutely necessary. At the end, she really designed her house, no? So for us, it's really a tool that enables those possibilities to really integrate those voices inside the design. A collage allows you to do that, no? And this is one of those meetings with another person before, when we realized that we had not been able to include his voice in the process, because we had kind of presented the third meeting a render, a kind of hyper-realistic render. He stayed in his mind with that image until the end of construction. Nevertheless, we evolved the design so much that at the end of the construction, that space never existed. And he came to the construction site and said, Tatiana, you remember where is this place? I mean, where the blonde girl like that was? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then he referred to this image. I'm like, oh my God, that space changed dramatically on the whole process. But he was there. But he never was able to catch up with us because we were using very architectural tools to represent those possibilities. So that's when we started using collage. as a tool, and we use it always. And it's always very controversial, and that's the point. So the first meeting we are with a collage, and they are like, no, but I don't want a dinosaur in my room. I mean, I'm exaggerating, no? But that's exactly the things we want to provoke, because then we create the possibility of understanding, no? And them understanding what the possibilities of space are. In the case of the aquarium, the first meeting to the client, we presented him as if we were talking in the year 2278, and he really went away like with the face, oh my God, what is this? No? Science fiction, and what am I doing? How am I spending my money? The next day he calls me and he says, Tatiana, I understand perfectly. It's like Atlantida. Let's do it. Ciao. And we built it.
Tatiana, one more question. I love that you answered that in that way, because I wanted to ask something about time. Thank you so much for sharing your work and the beautiful talk. I was noticing that in a lot of the projects you showed today, you listed the dates when you began the projects. A lot of the work, it seems that they are ongoing, but some of those projects have started 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I started thinking about kind of the life of the project, that there are certain economies of production. Maybe it's the projects you chose to show today compared to perhaps residential work or private houses, etc. But I think there was something incredibly sort of beautiful and interesting about this idea that a project is sort of never finished, and then it really takes time to get to know who you're working with, for them to know you, a place, a community. So can you say a few words about time? I don't know how to make it work, but I was like, it's incredible. This project has been in your office for 20 years.
Yeah, well, that's a botanical garden, no? That's the more longevous project in the office, and for us, it has been teaching us a lot of things. But one of the important aspects of, I think a lot about time, and that's probably one of the things that attracts me a lot to work on the monastery. But I think that because there you work with time in many regards, from a very symbolic bottom line point of start to a very practical thing, no, about the hours, no, measured by the clock. So I think that one of the aspects, no, that I think always is kind of this span of life and the specificity of architecture and ever-changing life that I've said. But also the other thing in which you mentioned, no, is that for me a project, I'm there only a very small part of it, no, even though it's 20 years. But it really, for me, when the building is there, it really starts a process of time that for me is where the architecture kind of relies and exists. No? So from the moment that it's able to arrive to a physical realm, that is when time starts for me. And then that is the evolution of it is what for me matters and counts. And the very kind of privileged thing that we have had is that in the Botanical Garden, for example, we have the privilege of being there since day one till now with buildings that have been built 16 years ago, and that now that we are starting to build another set of buildings, we are able to always live them with the community, understand how the process of time has created the evolution of those buildings. What are the evolutions of those buildings? How are they today after being thought 16 years ago? And these things that are really a privilege. But that has allowed us to kind of think of those things in every other project. And the majority of the photos that I am exhibiting, which I didn't put the date where the photo was taken, are taken more recently. So because we also do this exercise of going, understanding what's happening, what is the place now, how is it, and how it's evolving, to also learn cues on how to act. We have 2 more questions. No? Okay. Okay, like this.